Huawei Mate 10 Pro is the latest and greatest from the company, featuring a large high quality display and premium build quality. The Mate 10 Pro comes in a variety of colours, but for this review I've been supplied with the copper colour of the device. The device is IP67 certified, which means that it is dust resistant and also water resistant up to 1 meter for 30 minutes. The overall design of the device is extremely nice thanks to the glass and metal construction. I'm glad to see that glass is starting to make a comeback into phone designs, as I personally much prefer a glass-backed phone to a metal-backed phone. But having a glass back on the device does mean that it turns into a bit of a fingerprint magnet. As we're talking about the back of the device, you'll also find the dual Leica camera system here, as well as the fingerprint sensor, as there's no room for it on the front of the device as it's all screen. The fingerprint sensor is very good and it is able to recognise my fingerprint very quickly. The sides of the phone are metal. On the left hand side of the device you'll find a dual SIM combo slot with no microSD card slot, and on the bottom you'll find the USB-C port and speaker, but there is no headphone jack to be found either. Huawei does include a USB-C pair of headphones in the box, as well as an adapter, so you can still use your existing 3.5mm headphone jack headphones. On the right hand side of the device you'll find the volume buttons and the power button. The power button does have a different finish to the volume buttons, but it's not as prominent as I'd like on the P10, so it is a little harder to feel the difference in the buttons by touch. On the front side of the Mate 10 Pro you'll find the 6-inch 1080p display, as well as an 8-megapixel camera above it, and the earpiece, which works in part with the speaker on the bottom of the device to separate the treble and bass frequencies between the two to give better clarity when listening to audio. Covering the screen you'll also find a factory installed screen protector, which I'm not an enormous fan of because my finger keeps on catching on the edge of the screen protector as there is no bezel around the screen. And there's also a case thrown into the box too if you want to use that. The display on the Mate 10 Pro is fantastic. It's a 6-inch display which takes up the majority of the front of the phone, giving it an 80% screen to body ratio. So like many other modern smartphones, it's nice to see a large screen on the device that isn't much larger than a standard sized iPhone. The screen itself is an AMOLED panel, giving the screen very rich deep blacks and bright whites with full support for HDR10. Colours are well saturated on the display, nothing looks oversaturated, and watching videos and looking at images is a great experience. The aspect ratio of the display isn't 16:9 but 18:9. So if you're going to be watching videos on YouTube for example, there's going to be black bars on the side of the video unless you pinch to zoom in. The display gets very bright, allowing you to see the display in very bright daylight, and on the contrary, the display also gets very dim if you're using it at night. Viewing angles on the display are also very decent, as there's little to no distortion of the display, with it only getting a very slightly green tint when looking at it directly side on. As with all Huawei devices, the Mate 10 Pro comes with the EMUI Android skin running on top of Android Oreo. Huawei is putting a lot more attention into machine learning with a dedicated neural processing unit in the device's chipset. This machine learning will allow the device to automatically sense and give you suggestions depending on what you are doing on the device or where you may be. An example of this would be if you got a notification and you're watching a video on the phone. You could act upon the notification without even closing the video, as the device would detect this and bring up your notification action in split screen mode. The machine learning will also come in handy when you want to launch apps, as the phone will learn your behaviour, so apps will load faster when you want to open them. Another trend that's being seen as well on smartphones nowadays is desktop mode, and Huawei has brought their offering to the table with projection. All you need is a USB-C to HDMI adapter and you have a full desktop user interface at your fingertips. Personally, I haven't tried this out as I don't have an adapter, but it's nice to see that the function is there. The Mate 10 Pro also has some Huawei bundled apps, but the bloatware doesn't seem to be as bad as it used to be. Huawei has one app called Phone Manager that allows you to do a variety of functions such as optimization and virus scanning, so it appears that they're moving everything into one place. EMUI is still EMUI, so it seems to be quite iOS inspired, as by default the app drawer is disabled and has to be enabled in settings, which I did straight away, and the whole EMUI interface shows a lack of stock Android, but it's certainly not an awful interface by any means, it's just quite full on. Also, just before I move on to performance, a nice software feature is that if you forget to turn off this display and you put the phone in your pocket, the proximity sensor on the front of the display will stop touch input from happening, so you won't accidentally pocket dial anyone. This is a great feature because I may or may not have pocket dialed people in the past. Performance on the Mate 10 Pro is great, apps load quickly and everything feels very fluent. I haven't experienced any stuttering at all using the device, which is very nice to see, and whether it's gaming or simply just browsing Twitter, my experience is the same. No stuttering and an exceptional experience. I've tested my usual games on the device, those being Asphalt 8, Leo's Fortune and also Real Racing. All of those ran without any issues, so you certainly get in flagship performance with this device. With the camera on the Mate 10 Pro, Huawei's continued with the trend of the Leica dual camera system, and I think this may be the best camera I've personally seen and used on a smartphone. The dual camera system that comes with the device is a pair of 20 megapixel sensors that shoot 4K video. I left all the default settings on, so the samples you're going to see are 12 megapixels as the camera software uses the extra 8 megapixels for image stabilization and digital zoom. This is similar to how video shot on the device at 1080p will have stabilization and footage shot at 4K will not. The camera crops the sensor to stabilize the footage, and the second camera helps gather extra detail from a monochrome image as well as to work with the AI to create the toggleable depth of field effect. Overall, images look sharp and crisp, but I'm glad to say they don't look over sharpened. I'm very impressed and pleased with the quality of the camera on this device, as when I went back to my iPhone, the camera looked softer than what I'd been used to on the Mate 10 Pro. There was one thing I noticed though. Some of the landscape images I had taken looked a little desaturated and lacking in colour, even in HDR mode. The camera shoots 4K video at 30 frames a second and 1080p video at 30 frames a second with image stabilization, which works surprisingly well. But one thing to note is that if you're planning on shooting at 1080p 60 frames a second or 4K video, you won't get the stabilization function. The front-facing camera carries an 8 megapixel sensor and the photo quality from that is fantastic. The camera app also has some useful modes and smart recognition to use the best settings for shooting, and it also has full manual controls, so if you're familiar with manual modes on cameras or you play with aperture modes or anything like that, you'll like this ability to shoot in the manual mode. Battery life on the Mate 10 Pro is exceptional thanks to the 4000 mAh battery, which would easily get you through a day's usage and maybe two if you really needed it. The device also supports fast charging, so if you need to quickly top up your battery with some charge, you can charge the device to 50% capacity in 30 minutes, which is super useful. One thing that I do wish was possible with this device but is not is wireless charging. Huawei went to the hassle of having a glass back on the phone, but didn't even add the ability to have wireless charging. It would have been a nice feature to have, and seeing as so many other flagships have wireless charging, I don't get why Huawei didn't put it in. Overall, the Huawei Mate 10 Pro may be the best Android phone you can buy right now. If you're out looking for a new phone at this time of year, I will put this one under serious consideration to be your next daily driver for the next few years. Huawei said they're committed to providing updates for their devices, which is great because that can be rare for other Android phones, and it has great build quality and features that many people will be happy with. So that's been it for this video. Thanks to Vodafone for sending out the phone for review. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.